Pieces of that letter were tossed about the room, and now I hear the sound of sirens come knifing through the gloom, but they don't know what they are doing. They could hardly understand that they're only arresting pieces of a man. I saw him go to pieces. I saw him go to pieces. He was always such a good man. He was always such a strong, strong man. Yeah, I saw him go to pieces. I saw him go to pieces.
I'm not sure how this works, or if it even does. I know I'm not the first, nor will I be the last. I mean, and as sad as that is to say, you didn't exactly make it easy for me. Look, I know there are things that I shouldn't have done, things that I should have, and can say the same for you. I mean, maybe it just goes to show that you are just like us. I didn't mean any disrespect, but maybe you are. You know, my grandma said that's nothing to feel bad about. Feeling human, feeling as if all your mistakes outweigh the goodness in your soul. I know I feel it. The same way you feel it, or used to, but yet I find myself standing there. It's like my mistakes turn to this quicksand that won't let me out of its grip. Like I said, I've made mistakes, okay? Okay, but so have you. No, the truth is, I'm putting God on trial for his crimes against humanity. I mean, how can you just sit there and let this happen to us? All I wanted was a chance. That's all I want. But I guess they kill us before we get it. Look, I don't know what you have to do up there, and I'm not trying to be all up in your business, but you can't tell me that you don't see what's going on here. I mean, maybe God did help build this country. Because you are just like the rest of them. I mean, you say that you care, but we haven't seen you do anything. I mean, where's your power at, huh? Because we haven't seen it. So as far as I'm concerned, what in the hell have you really done for us? And just saying that things are supposed to be this way. Now, I know that that's bullshit. Look, I'm sorry for the language, but things can't be this way. And no one seemed to care. Nothing seemed as if anyone cared for any of us. But the truth is, they didn't. The truth in the face of their reality, and you already know who's going to win. But my truth is the reality. My truth matters.
Welcome. I have a few people to introduce here, 4 speakers. We have our keynote speaker, Danial Alarik, coming up. So Danial, to accommodate his family and his fellow veterans, Danial is a former Army drill sergeant, and he came up with a unique idea that eventually became Gruntstyle, a military-themed clothing and apparel company, of which over 50% of employees are veterans. In addition to providing a place where veterans can work together, he also operates Gruntstyle much the way a military infantry unit is run, with headquarters, sergeants, and platoons. Please welcome today's afternoon keynote, Danial Alarik.
So 7 years ago, I was a drill sergeant down in Fort Benning, Georgia. I was training a bunch of infantrymen, and my wife looked over at me, or she called me from Chicago, and she said, hey, hey, go back, obey. There you go. My wife called me, and she's like, hey, it's time to start thinking about coming out, getting out of the Army. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And I'm trying to think, what am I going to do? And I wanted to take that sense of, or that culture of pride and patriotism that the military instills in you. And so I came up with the idea of Gruntstyle. So I squeezed all the pennies I had together, and it came to about $1,200, and just threw them in my car, and I started driving around the southern United States, selling them out of the back of my car, sleeping in the back of my car, trying to make it work. And today, now we're over 230 employees, over half of them are vets. Recently, we've been valued at over $150 million. And even last New Year's Eve 2016, we premiered our first nationwide commercial at the World Series of Fighting in Madison Square Garden. It was pretty exciting. So here it is right now.
This flag isn't backwards, it's assaulting forward. Born was a nation of independence, who made the choice to make their lives and their families' lives better. Always moving forward, never retreating, never giving up. We carry on that tradition today. Fight on, break through, never quit. This flag isn't backwards, it's assaulting forward. We are Gruntstyle, and this will defend.
So we're a company that's, yes, we sell clothing, but more importantly, we sell pride. That's what we do. We're meant to inspire and instill pride in who you are, in the services that you do, and in the country that provides those freedoms that we can celebrate. That's important to us. But when I started the company, I had no business being in business. And this is the point I'm trying to make to you. If you don't feel like you're qualified to start your own business, that's okay. Because I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, and I'm sure yours sounds a lot better than mine. I literally Googled what is business when I was starting out, because I just didn't know what it meant, right? I just made some shirts, and I want to sell it, and then I'm trying to make it work. Literally had to Google what is business. I have no college degree, but I just read a lot. So I'm trying to figure out how to put things together. So we're going to start going through the different processes of going from a startup to making over $100 million. And how many guys here are already started a business? Raise your hand. All right, good. Now keep your hand up. Now, how many people are thinking about starting a business? All right, so a few more. So I'm going to tell you the story of how do you go from 0 to $100 million in no time flat, and a lot of the problems you're going to encounter and what to overcome them. Because believe me, I've made all the mistakes possible. They say a wise man learns from other mistakes, a smart man learns from his own, right? Well, that must make me semi-smart because I've made all of them. Everything I've messed up. But that's okay. So we're going to start with the startup. So when you're starting up your business, there's only one thing that matters. And the problem is most people don't know this is what you should be focused on, right? Only one thing that matters. So when you're starting, does anyone feel who's starting or thinking of starting is like, what am I really supposed to be doing today, right? Does anyone ever feel like that? You wake up and like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I know I should be doing something, and I really want to get here, and I'm not there yet. Does anyone feel like that sometimes? Right? That's called every day when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting something up. So the whole purpose of your startup is you have to prove that you have a viable company. And I said company, not product, for a reason. You can have an app, a bike, a piece of apparel that's a good product, cookies or whatever, that are all good products. Maybe you make Aunt Jemima's cookies, I don't know, and they're delicious. That's a good product. It doesn't mean you have a business. You have to prove that you're viable. And to become viable, you have to sell enough product and operate your business in such a fashion that you have extra money at the end of the month. You made extra money, more than you put in, every 30 days or 31 days, whatever, to continue to grow your business. And usually this is from 0 to $1 million. Once you reach about $1 million in annualized revenue, you probably most likely have a viable business. And doesn't mean $1 million of earned money. So again, we started for $1,200. My rich uncle lives in a trailer, so no one gave us money whatsoever. And guys, if I can do that, 100%, you guys are a lot smarter crowd. I've mingled with a lot of you guys. You guys are smart. So you can do a whole lot more than that. So first 3 years of the business, I'm driving around the country, sleeping in the car, sleeping on top of the product. Don't tell the customers that, just because I had nowhere else to go. And then I'd go to a local base, use my military ID, and go to the base gym just to shower, and then I'd go back to work. And I did that for 3 years. Who's married? How many wives have put up with that for 3 years, right? What a saint. So after about 3 years, my lovely wife looks over at me. She's like, Dan, it's not working. I'm like, what do you mean? Of course it's working. Look at all this money I'm making. She's like, sure. You made 15 grand last month, but it cost us 16. That's not smart, Dan. I'm like, well, things are working themselves out. They're like, they're not working out, Dan. I'm like, okay. Babe, there's a trade show, our first trade show ever in Las Vegas. We're at Lisa? Las Vegas, yeah, woo. And it's a trade show in Las Vegas. It's the first one ever. I know we can make this work. She's like, well, tell me what you think makes it work means. I'm like, if we do $6 grand at the show, that's a sign from the heavens that we should be in business. And she's like, okay. I'm like, great, you're coming with me. She's like, okay. So we take the cheapest flight possible, probably those $59 flights to Las Vegas from Chicago. You sit in the back with the chicken crates in the bathroom, right? And then we finally land, and then we take the free shuttle to the hotel, and then we walk about a mile and a half to the nearest grocery store because we couldn't afford a taxi. There was the Uber wasn't really a thing yet, 2012, or just starting. And then we buy a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter, and we walk back to the hotel, and that's all we ate for the next 2.5 days during the show, except for she had one Groupon, so we had like a hamburger once or something like that. And then we just worked the entire show. She would go around, she'd put on a tight shirt and said, hey, come see our booth, we're awesome. And then I would try to sell them. So we do this the entire show, right? and then by the time we get back on the plane, we're exhausted, and she passes out, right? And I'm like adding up all the receipts. I'm like, all right, let's see how well we crush this thing, right? I added up, and it was $6,200, right? I was like, wow, if that's a sign from the heaven, that's more like a kick in the ass or something like that. It was horrible. I'm like, why is this so hard? That was just enough to be depressed about staying open, right? I was like, this sucks. So I pulled out a yellow legal pad, drew a line down the center of paper, thinking there's got to be a better way. And then I'm like, I'm going to write down the name of every person, company, or organization I know that's better than me, which is a lot, and I'm going to write down what they're doing that I'm not. Because whatever I'm doing isn't working. Or if it is, it's working so horribly, I don't want to do this anymore. But I loved what I was doing. So I wrote down all these lists of different companies, organizations, and I figured out some things that they were doing that I wasn't. And sometimes I couldn't do what they were doing, and sometimes I could. So for example, one of them was like, okay, this company right here, Skittles at the time was crushing it on Facebook. I'm like, they're posting 4 times a day. I'm posting twice a week. That's free, I can do that. They're doing fun stuff, so I can do that. This company's releasing a new product every 3 days. Well, I can't afford that, but I can do maybe 3 or 4 a month, sure. So all these little steps, following the leader to try to make myself viable. Follow someone who's better than me. And that's what you do when you're in a startup. You don't have all the answers. If you did, you wouldn't be in a startup. You would be a lot more beyond that, right? I'd be sitting in the audience listening to you because you're awesome, you're a rock star. And so that's the secret, is just follow the leader. Find out someone who's better than you and do what they're doing. Make your company viable. It's a scramble when you're a startup to make your company viable. Prove that how you conduct business can self-fund itself forward. Break that $1 million mark. So when we started that January, we did I think all in, including the show, we did like $8,000 that month, all right? Not a whole lot. But by December that same year, we did $64,000 in 1 month, which at that time was a ton of money. And it was because of those little changes of trying to make yourself viable and disciplined that would make you successful. So that's the startup. So after you get past that startup, you reach your first $1 million, hooray, you know what to do, and this is a process you can repeat over and over and over again. I'm selling this product, doing it this way, keeping my finances this disciplined, and we're going to be successful, right? But then you become something called a mom and pop shop. Mom and pop shop is basically where everyone is kind of an extension of you and they're all working. But you can get to about $1 million, maybe $5 million a year like this, and you're hustling around trying to make everything work, but your sales start slowing down. So what do? You create new products that are the same. Here's the reason why. For example, for us, we were just selling t-shirts, right? Easy. So you come to our website, you buy a t-shirt, and you're like, awesome, I like your t-shirts, blah, blah, blah. Well, as I continue to get more customers in, and I have a few new products, more t-shirts, right? Well, you can only wear a t-shirt, 5, 6, 7 days a week. You kind of run out, right? But then my same customers would go out to another store and buy hoodies, hats, and whatever else. I'm like, well, they're buying those products anyway. Some of them would prefer to buy it from me, so why don't I make more products? So to get over that next hump of that mom and pop shop and to continue growing, create more products that your customers are buying anyway, but would prefer to buy from you. That's it. It's very, very simple. Startup is a lot harder than this method. This is a lot easier. But if you can identify what's going on, you'll accelerate right through it. And then you'll rocket yourself into what we call a small business. Now, a small business is basically now you have teams. Now you're doing $5 million to $25 million a year. This is awesome. Good for you. That's a lot of money, right? Now you have a lot of people going on. You have 12, 15, 25 people, 50 people working for you, maybe even more. That's a lot of people. But now you have a problem. Your team is falling apart, and most importantly, your customers notice. And if we all know, your boss pays you. So if you're the owner, guess who your boss is? It's customers, right? Customer's the boss. If you're writing my paycheck every time you go online and place an order, you're my boss, so I have to listen to you. So you notice that your team is falling apart. Now you got to identify why. So you probably already read all the way down below and you see what it says already, but let me explain why. That when you're a small mom and pop shop, your shipping guy, hey, the dude who ships, is now your shipping manager, right? And he's got 4 or 5 guys underneath him. Why is he the shipping manager? It's because he was there first. That's human nature. It wasn't because he was the best at it. He's a hard worker. He's a good person. You can kind of rely on him, and he was there first. Does that make him qualified to be the shipping manager? No, but nobody wants to tell him that, right? So what do? Can he do it? Maybe. But if you don't organize and professionalize, you won't make it past this phase. This is a very hard phase to get into that small business. But all you have to do is create some disciplines. Now, when you're in this phase, when you're a startup, it's cool, hey, show up whenever, wear sandals whenever, and who cares? You can wear a robe to work, nobody cares, right? Your designer says, hey, it snowed last night, can't move my car, so I'm just gonna work from home today. And then you say, okay, whatever, cool. Right? Because that's how startups work, right? Startups, yeah, that's kind of how it goes. Yeah, of course it does. Or your customer service person, like, I got the emails from home today, I'm going to be at the beach or something. I'm like, sure. Because you're the person I count on. I got a team of 4 people. Of course you can do whatever you want, but you still get the job done. I don't care. The problem is when you're a small business, you can't do that anymore. You want to, and you think people should still be able to, but they can't. Okay? They don't see it like you do. And that's okay. They're still good people and they still want to work hard, but some people can't make this transition, and that's okay. So when your designer calls you again and said, hey, it snowed, I'm not coming in to work today, and then the 2 new designers that you see came in here, they don't see this as, hey, we're all kind of in this together trying to build something here. They're in a small business. They got hired into a small business. So what do they see is they see an opportunity to build their career and support their families. So when they see you being unfair, which is exactly what you're doing to your designer guy just because he was there first, they see the company as being unfair, and that is not where they're going to stake their claim. So when you have highly qualified people to help you build your company, see this is unfair, they're not going to stick around, and that's your fault. So you have to professionalize. And those legacy characters that you have in, some of them are going to shape up, they'll get it, they'll fight you the first 2 times, but then they'll be fine. And some of them will be like, no, I'm showing up whenever I want to do whatever I want. Guess what? That's not really how things grow and work. If you can go do that at the grocery store or another tech place, great, go nuts, because you can't do that here anymore. I'm sorry, thank you for getting us here. That's what we're doing now. And if you do that, you can become a small business and grow from $5 million to $25 million a year. But that's going to be your biggest problem. And you're going to notice that's your problem when your teams start falling apart. That's when communication starts breaking down. Okay? Now, if you get through that, you're going to go into your next phase, which is becoming a mid-sized business. That's $25+ million a year. This is going to be your hardest transition as a leader and amongst your leaders, almost as hard as your startup phase. Take it from me, it took us a long time to get through this phase. It's hard because you don't see it coming. Because the way you're operating as a small business, you figure you're gonna just be a rocket forever. But you can't operate like that anymore. And let me tell you why. So the problem you're gonna see is your teams are in chaos. Sales and processes are breaking down, and your sales are stalling. And they're stalling not because you don't have a great product or you don't have good people. It's because of how they're structured. So what do you do about it? Upgrade your team. You train, lead, and mentor them. So this is what I mean by that. Training them, it means you have to actually come up with a plan. You're in charge of the team. You're the CEO. You're the founder, right? Or one of the co-founders. You're in charge of the team. They're well trained because you planned it that way. It's no longer, hey, come in and spend the day with this dude over here, and then you're going to be smarter. That doesn't work anymore because you're no longer in one room working together. You can do that when you're a mom and pop shop or a startup, right? Where your eyes on everybody. Oh, you got a problem? Come over here. Let's work on that. You're actually training and mentoring right there. The problem is you can't give them that attention anymore. And then your intentions, which you think are being implemented, are now 2 leadership levels below you, and you have no idea. You just assume it's being done like the way you did it. And guess what? It's not, and it won't, unless you plan something different. So it's your job to plan it the way to be successful. Come up with a plan as, hey, so you're gonna be my shipping guy, right? So this is your planning, training this is how I'm gonna plan your training. This is what you're gonna do. And then you're gonna lead them. Now leading could be 2 different things. One, you have to be the appropriate leader of coming up with the plan, and if you're directly in charge of them, then you have to be the example. You're always the example. You're in charge, be the right example. The last one is the most important one, is the mentorship. Mentorship is not, hey, just come down and we'll have an hour lunch together once a week and we'll just chat about whatever. I see that happen all the time with mentorship, and that is not mentorship. That's called hanging out. Nobody gets better except for I got to rub elbows with the CEO or whoever, all right? It doesn't do anything for you except for maybe they stroke your ego for a little bit and you feel good about it. Hey, we're all smarter today. That's not what's happening. If you want to truly mentor somebody, listen to this story of how we mentor people in the Army when we're shooting what's called basic rifle marksmanship. So when you're learning to train on a rifle, it's very, very technical. Yet it's a high stress environment which you have to be relaxed at. Right? It's very counterintuitive, right? So the main shooter will lay down in the prone position, laying on the ground, stomach down, and trying to shoot the targets. The mentor will sit on the right side of that person and watch every technical aspect of that shooter, making very gentle, calm corrections. They will complement the behavior they want repeated, and they will correct the behavior that they don't. That is mentorship. I will sit down and calmly watch you do your job for a small period of time, and all I'm doing is I'm complimenting the behavior I want repeated, and I am going to discipline or correct the behavior I don't. Just like pets. People are just like pets. So am I. Like being petted once in a while. But kibbles and bits, maybe. And that is mentorship. It's not hanging out. And you've got to get that through your head if you're going to continue to grow. And you can start that mentorship at any phase. You as a leader should always be mentoring your juniors, even if you don't have direct control or contact with them, is complement the behavior you want repeated and discipline or correct the behavior you don't. That's it. They need to know what their standards are. Everybody, 99% of the existence of the human race or the population needs to know what the standard is. Most people will tell you they don't. No, I like free, open environment, blah, 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 do whatever. You really don't. I don't. You have to, as a leader, you're going to realize that the more successful you become or the more you have to do, the more task lists and checklists you have in front of you. But because you have to measure if you're successful or not. If when you go into work, who's ever worked for somebody who's very disorganized? Anyone's ever worked for somebody that they didn't know what to expect? Tell me how frustrating is that? Is that frustrating? It's miserable, right? I don't know if I'm doing a good job. Do you want me to do this? Is this good? I don't know. I had a job, I got fired from there once, but I was an office job for this transportation company, and I thought I was just crushing it. And then I'd come in at 7:30, I'd finish all my work by 9, I'd go to my boss and I'm like, hey, give me something else to do. I'm ready to do more. He's like, no, you're good. I'm like, all right, so I pulled out a book, and then he's like, hey, you can't read. I'm like, well, give me something to do. I'll stack boxes, sort papers, just give me something mundane. I want to work harder. And he's like, nope, you need to spread your work out. I'm like, well, that is not good leadership. It was frustrating. I'm like, I'm telling you, I want to do more. I can do a lot more, and then just spread your work out. And then I got fired for not fitting in or something. But may have had a little attitude as well. But put that aside. So key point is, if you're going to be a good leader, you're always mentoring, regardless if it's someone you see all the time. Even if it's passing in the hallway, you see an opportunity, take it. So the last thing on this crossing into becoming a mid-sized business is removing those who can't make it gently. So you're gonna find that there are people, your shipping guy, let's say he made it to be the shipping team leader and he kept making it, and now he's the fulfillment manager and he's charged of 50 people in 3 shifts, okay? And this guy did it in 18 months. That sounds pretty incredible, right? Probably he's drowning because he doesn't have the experience to make it. It's tough. Most people can't make that transition. If you promoted him that quickly, and he was unqualified, you probably let him down. You probably failed him. Sometimes you have to hold people back a little bit on purpose so they can get the experience and be successful. But let's say, for whatever reason, he just kept doing it, but then he hits this point where you keep throwing people in his apartment and he's not making it. What do? You have to let him out. Get him out. Because he's holding your company and everyone else back. Your company's success is dependent on what your decision making is. You are not the smartest person in the room, and that's okay. You just want to make sure that the smartest people in the room are on your side of the table. That's your job as a leader, okay? You build teams. So to do that, you realize that this person is no longer qualified. They definitely don't need the insult of taking a demotion, and don't laterally move them and make up a position and with the same salary. That's disrespectful for all the people who are making it. So what do? Got to get them out. And you can do it gently without offending anyone because they already know they're drowning. When you sit them down and say, hey, listen, man, it's not working right now. You've been incredible up to this point. You helped us build X, Y, and Z. I'm so proud of you. So I'm going to do 3 things for you. 1, here's my cell phone number. And I want, wherever you go next, I want you to give them my personal cell phone number. I'm the CEO, and I'm going to sing your praises about the rock star that you are, because you deserve a great position somewhere, but it's not going to be here. You're not going to fit into our new model. 2, I'm going to pay you for the next 12 months, full salary and benefits. You don't have to worry about your income. You don't have to worry about your family's health. It's taken care of, because you earned it. You worked your butt off. You got it. I don't care if you get a job next week. You're still getting paid. Don't care, because you earned it. And 3, you're going to sign this non-disparagement agreement saying if you ever badmouth my company or come out or leave in a disrespectful way, I'm just not paying you anymore. Keeps them on the hook a little bit. Everyone's happy to sign those, by the way. Nobody's like, yeah, totally. Just tell them it's a legal thing, which it is. So, right, that's an easy way to let them off. And you think you'd get pushback? Not once have I ever seen anyone not grateful for that, because they already know they're drowning. They go into work dreading it now. The company that they love, they still love the company. They hate their job now because they can't do it. They're failing every single day. Those are the people that you need to get out. Okay? Now you can come up with your own terms with them depending on their contribution. That's up to you. But get them out. That's your responsibility. Most people can't make this transition, going from from team leader to all of a sudden managing 50 people or whatever the responsibility is. It's tough. That's okay. They're going to have a great career somewhere else. There are a lot of jobs in the United States. They're going to be okay. All right, and finally, going to 50 million plus a year and beyond. Awesome. Problem, your sales are slowing, the team and customers are complaining. Here's the problem. It's you. You're in the way. So, about a year and a half ago or so, about a little over a year ago, I was out at a trade show right outside Chicago. We're based in Chicago, or in the suburbs, and I had to talk to one of my leaders, so I just called our customer service line, right? And didn't think anything of it. I'm like, let me just test the customer service line, making sure everything's good. I pride ourselves on how we conduct our customer service. So I call in, and we don't have any automation. I don't like Mr. Robot answering for the bank, and you got to punch like 38 numbers and get 4 transfers, and eventually you're just pounding zeros, screaming customer service representative, because it never really works. So we don't have that. It's thank you for calling Gruntstyle. If you know your party extension, you can dial it. Otherwise, stand by for customer service. And then a few seconds later, a human picks up, say, hey, what's going on? How can I solve your problem? But if there's a hold time, it'll tell you what your wait time is. So I call in, and it says 71 minutes. I was like, huh, something's broken here. Hung up the phone. I'm like, let me call back. There's some sort of glitch going on. Call back, and it says, blah, 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 thank you, 72 minutes. I'm like, okay, now I got a problem. So I rush back to the building, storm in there, and just like every other leader, I start managing our way out of this problem. Like, all right, I need 3 people here on the phones from there. I want you to pull 4 people from the sales team, have them jump on emails. We were 14,000 plus emails behind, and and we even peaked out at 90 minutes on the phone time. And I was just micromanaging everyone to get in their places, and we're going to sit here. Everyone's got overtime. No one's leaving until we solve this problem right now. This is how we're doing it. And we crushed the problem. In the matter of days, we were back down to our normal rate. It was about 4 or 5 minute hold time, and everyone was getting an email answer within a few hours, 12 hours at most. That's great. So I check in on it a few weeks later, and we peaked out over 100 minutes on the hold time again. Everything just fell apart. It was worse. What happened? We just fixed the problem. Now it's worse. So I started thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna put a dashboard right over the customer service manager, and I'm gonna make sure that his key numbers are right there all the time. And I started thinking, because we have a very military-like culture over there, because of all the veterans, I'm like, if this was in the military, how could I translate this to be successful? And then I started thinking, I remember all these times where the operations center kept trying to micromanage the guys in the field, trying to say direct fire for them, but the operations center is miles away. Why are you trying to manage my engagement over here when you can't even see it? You're just getting my reports, and then you're trying to manage me? All I'm doing is I'm telling them I don't trust them. I'm telling my leaders I don't trust your decision making, even though that's what I hired you to do. So I'm like, okay, what if I give them a goal, I give them the assets to complete the job, and I get out of the way? What if I did that? In fact, I'm not so sure this would work in the company, but if it did, I wonder if it would help us be the best in the business. Best customer service in e-commerce on the planet. How do we do that? So I gave them what I call the 30-30 challenge, which means every email is answered in 30 minutes, and every phone call is picked up within 30 seconds. And we did that for 30 days. That would make us the best in customer service on e-commerce, because we have volumes well into the tens of thousands on a weekly basis for phone calls and emails, etc. So if we can handle that, we'd be the best. So I gave them I gave them everything they needed, and then they said, okay, they asked if they can make it a challenge. I'm like, sure, make it a challenge. I said, if you guys are able to complete this after 30 days, I'll get a nice party bus or a limo and send you downtown for some nice steaks or something like that. I'm like, sure. But you're going to have to wear, Dan, for our next company meeting, which we call Beer 30, we have a kegerator in our dining facility. You have to wear whatever we dress you up as. I'm like, sure. So by the end of the month, they crushed it. Totally annihilated those numbers. Hit every single goal with flying colors. And I don't have a picture with me, but I was wearing nice 6-inch pumps and a tutu skirt or something like that. Anyway. But they nailed it. In fact, to this day, they still nail it. We consistently have last week it was 14-second phone pickup time, and the email time was at 7 minutes. That's faster than your crazy ex text messaging you. They're that fast. And the only problem was me. I was the problem. I did what every typical leader did, was I just stayed involved. I was trying to micromanage them. No one's smarter than me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to lead this way to success. I'm the brilliant commander on the field. The fact is, you're wrong. Your job is to set up and empower teams. They're the ones doing the work. So empower them. Let them do the work. Now, some leaders won't make it, and that's okay. That's when you identify the leaders. But a lot of times it's you. You're the problem. I'm the problem. Get out of the way. So if you want to grow beyond that, you have to get out of the way. You simply cannot communicate or effectively enough at that size to be successful. Trust your teams. So every phase is difficult. You have to know where you are in your phases. Are you a startup? Are you a mom and pop shop? You got to identify what those problems is and how to overcome them. You have to know where you're going. So if you're plotting a map, okay, of where your life or your business life, entrepreneur life, right, et cetera. Put your start point, your SP, bam, this is where I'm at, all right? I got nothing, I got an idea, that's okay. What's my next point? Well, I wanna prove that I'm viable. I'm gonna race to $1 million, showing profit, boom. And then you have to plan out what's in between. That's a lot of planning, that's okay, that's your job. Plan it out, know where you're going, and then be in charge of the results. Win or lose, it's your fault, you're in charge. If you're successful, it's your fault. If you fail, it's your fault. Okay? If you're successful, it's your team's fault because you made a good team, but that's your responsibility. There is no outside factor, no economic whatever. There is nothing that you should be able to blame to maneuver. There are plenty of companies that started off something different than they are now, and it's because of the decisions they made. Yes, you are going to have good luck and you are going to have bad luck. Whether you're prepared or not is your fault. That's your responsibility. You're in charge. Thank you. Now I know we have a mic up here if anyone wanted to ask some questions. I would love to hear from some of you guys that are starting business or in business about some of your questions. Come on up. Who had a business? Who's got a business that they're starting? I'd love to hear about it. Nobody, everyone's done. They gave up. I just painted a horrible picture and everyone wants to quit. Who's got a business? Oh, come on. Tell me about it.
Should I step up there? I can talk here.
All right, just be loud.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing much. I mean, my business at this point is more of a name and a website and an idea, but I have a musician and I've created an LLC that I have in mind to be, well, I have a lot of things in mind for it, but right now it's functioning as my record company. And yeah, so that's what I'm releasing my music.
Awesome. Have you sold anything yet?
Yes, I have an album out that I'm making very minor sales on.
It's okay. I sold out of the back of my car, not massive sales there. It was not a very big car. I had to sleep diagonally in it. So what's your next steps?
My next step is I have another album that I'll be putting out between in the next few weeks and in July. So basically sometime in the next 6 weeks I have another album. And then I'm going to put out, my plan is to then release another one after that, and by the time I get to the fourth one, I want to start getting into clothing, adding some t-shirts and whatnot, items like that to my line.
Sounds like you're starting another product before you get the first one off the ground. Those are ideas and those are smart. How are you going to prove that you can self-propel this business off of the profits that you're making with what you're selling right now?
How am I going to prove it?
So you have an album, you sell it. Do you know how much you need to make to keep growing it?
No, I do not.
So that's important to know because most people don't do that type of planning. And it's so important. And that planning can just take a few hours and most people don't do it and it gives them years of hardship because they just don't take the couple hours it is to plan it out. Well, if I need to make $100,000 knowing that half of that will be profit or $50,000, there's $50,000 a year for you, right? I have to sell this many albums. How many people do I come in contact to sell this many albums? I have to contact 100 people to sell one album. So to make $100,000, I have to come in contact, 10 million people, right? If it's $1 an album or whatever, right? I don't know. So this little planning or backwards planning could save you a lot of time or give you a lot of focus. Because now you know exactly what you need to do to prove that you have a viable product or a company, right? Who else has got a business? What you got?
It's called Studio Me, but my question...
Is that just like the shirt?
Yeah.
It's wearing a Studio Me shirt.
So my question is, you said you went from doing 8,000 in sales to 64,000 within a matter of months. Was there any, were there just a couple things that you tweaked a little bit that made...
Yes. Here's the one thing that you need to do to go from $0 to $1 million. The secret of this one thing is, the secret one thing is, it's not one thing. It's a lot of everything. There is no one thing. If you just, and I see people, give speeches and write these articles all the time. If you do these 3 things, you'll be successful. Guess what? Those people aren't that successful anyway because they're just selling you articles of these 3 things. It's called clickbait. We all know what that is, and they have 30,000 ads on them. There is no one thing. It's a lot of little things. You need to be able to market. Now, what does that mean? That means you got to do 30,000 different things all the time right now. However, if you can break down marketing funnel, which is a whole nother talk, of how many people you need to reach to bring how many people to your store or website or whatever, and how many of those will convert into an actual sale, you now know I need to reach this many people because this many will come to the store and this many will convert. And that will provide this much dollars. That's a marketing funnel. But there's 1,000 wrong ways to do it, but there's also 100 right ways to do it. And it's not one thing. But I looked at others who were more successful than me, and that's what I learned.
Yeah, because you went from 3 years of
sucking. Oh, sucked.
Something you did that year made that difference.
Yeah, there was a lot of little things. Absolutely. Who else? What you got?
I don't know if it's but the questions. First is you said your company has a military-like culture, but I guess it's quite different from other companies and the culture in our daily life. So what do your employees think about it?
We have a fantastic culture. Now, it's just like, our culture is like a family. You're going to see a lot of fighting all the time, but at the end of the day, most of them got each other's back. You're going to have people, when we have a couple hundred people, you're going to have bad seeds and eggs and whatever. And if you build a good culture, your culture will push them out. That's okay. Just be a family. Keep it's okay to fight, but again, if you're on top, you're the daddy. So right, you're not friends. You're the dad. Dad's not your friend. He's friendly and kind, but he also has to be just and fair. Does that kind of make sense?
Sometimes when your employees have problems, you have to educate and mentor them. So does it mean that you must always be better than employees?
No, you don't have to be better. It's like being, I was a squad leader in a weapons squad in the Army. Some of my guys were better machine gunners than I was, and that's okay. I just made sure that they were the best. Your job as a leader is to make sure your team is the most effective. It doesn't mean you're the best technician, it means you're the best leader. You give them the ability to become better. You still have to know your stuff, and it's okay if they know better than you, but make them better. And it's not always a technical skill. It can be very versed. Thank you very much, guys. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, so we have 3 more speakers, I think each for about 7 minutes. Excited to see the next speaker here. Ime Alarik is an Emmy Award-winning film director, composer, and mentor. Once homeless, today Alarik is the CEO of Yamam's House, Inc., an award-winning multimedia company, director for CBS Sports Network's daytime Emmy-nominated TV show Game Changers, as well as founder of the award-winning arts education program Hip Hop on Lock. This 5-time Telly Award winner has been recognized as Pittsburgh Magazine's 40 Under 40, the New Pittsburgh Courier's Fab 40, and World Magazine's 50 Finest. He was recently named a 2016 BME Community Leader and was also recently recognized by Barack Obama. Welcome, Ime.
What's up, everybody? What's going on? All right, when I say hip hop, y'all say hip hop. Hip hop. Hip hop. Hip hop. Hip hop. Exactly. Boom. Finding our rhythm. Whatever we choose to do in life, we have to find our tempo and our rhythm, the pattern in which we do things. Today, I am a proud CEO of Your Mom's House, which is a full-service multimedia company right here in the city of Pittsburgh, official minority business enterprise. Also, founding director of Hip Hop on Lock, and new title, curator with Optic Voices. But I wasn't always here. I battled through the adversities of life. I battled through homelessness. I was homeless for about 1.5 years when I went through a deep depression. Very well could have asked anyone in here for 50 cents. I slept on the concrete. I ate at the Jubilee Kitchen, the Rainbow Kitchen, and things of that nature. But I decided to switch directions and use what I grew up on. What I grew up on, I thought I was super fresh. When I fell in love with hip hop, I was in a group called Tough Enough. But hip hop saved my life. Through homelessness, through adversities, I found my rhythm through music and creativity through the arts. Hip hop spoke to me in a way that nothing else spoke to me. I didn't have mentoring programs and things of that nature. There weren't these grand opportunities when I was growing up and things of that nature. It was either boys and girls club or it was after school lunches. So I found a way to find my rhythm through hip hop by using 4 elements of hip hop. And I wanted to use it as a metaphor to how I run my life. Graffiti. Of course, as you read graffiti, how will we create the graffiti on our personal walls? Sometimes we get wrapped up on what we post on Facebook, what we post on Twitter, what we post on Instagram. What does our life's wall look like? Growing up, I used graffiti as a way of how am I going to, carve in my legacy. Then we have breakdancing. Breakdancing in hip hop is the form of moving. When we find our rhythm and we find our joy in life, we have to move. If you have a dream and you don't move, how can we accomplish anything? So metaphorically, I use breakdancing as, okay, cool. So if I have this dream, I have to get on the cardboard or get on the middle of the dance floor and move, regardless of who else is up against the wall, looking at everybody dancing in the middle of the floor, just hating away. I gotta move, I gotta break dance. You have to find your rhythm and break dance throughout life. MCing, some of my favorite rappers, Rakim, KRS-One, Jay-Z, LL Cool J, Will Smith. I use them as a metaphor of how am I going to use my voice once I find my rhythm? How am I going to spit on the microphone, speak loudly, and show people, hey, listen, this is what I'm serious about. That is what it's all about, using these elements. The last element of hip hop is DJing. We use a turntable. Sometimes that turntable is like the world that spins around. And sometimes on the side, we have to slow it down or we got to speed it up. And when we find our rhythm, sometimes our rhythm and our record skips. But it's up to us to wipe off that needle and put it back onto that record and have the party rock of our lives. So I started Hip Hop on Lock, arts education program that's started out with 16 students with our partnership with the Union Project. Today, we service over 5,000 young people in 11 school districts throughout Western Pennsylvania. And Hip Hop on Lock is an arts education and mentoring program that employs hip hop as a tool to educate and empower young people. This is how we're using creativity. So I want to play, we have a partnership with Environmental Charter School, just 60 seconds. Can we play that video? Well,
What's up? This is DJ Hank D for Hip Hop on Lock down here at the Frick Environmental Charter School. I'm here to talk about DJing and why it's important and why we need hip hop to stay in our schools.
This is the source of where hip hop music comes from. Every rapper wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for the DJ.
DJing is the foundation of hip hop, or the backbone. It's where it all began in the Bronx in the 70s, and it's still very important in hip hop today.
Having DJ Hank D in the class is really awesome because it's a new type of music class that not many schools get to be a part of.
We just got done teaching a workshop for Hip Hop on Lock, and even though the music's getting cut out of the budget, we're still keeping hip hop and music alive in the schools because we love the kids.
So that's in 60 seconds, it shows what we're doing in Environmental Charter School. We're currently in Winchester Thurston, Shadyside Academy, Pittsburgh Public Schools, all of the Propel schools as well. As they're taking out arts education, we're putting it back in so that we can be innovative and creative at showing our young people how to download education. So as a result of finding my rhythm, and I'm not this successful because just me by myself. It's when we find our rhythm, we could really change the world. I was featured on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon in February. Just featured my wife and I as couples who make a difference in World Magazine. Won my first Emmy in 2007 Currently working on a lot of projects here out in the city of Pittsburgh. Also this Sunday, I'll be hosting TEDx Pittsburgh. Never in a million years. Never in a million years would I know that going from homelessness for a year and a half, very well walking on this bridge, asking people for money, to being able to lay on TEDx numbers. That is what we do when we find our rhythm, when we find our dream. We got to stay on beat. And lastly, I was 16 years old when I cut this. I'm 40 plus now. I was 16 years old. Just imagine what came true in this video.
Hey, my friend, let's rap just a minute. I'm looking at my future and I don't see you in it. See, I'm staying in school, going to get my education. And where I go from there, use your imagination. I see a house, a car, a wonderful wife, and enough money left to lead a good life. I'm going to spoil myself, buy whatever's the rage. But you can't do that unless you earn a good wage. Good wage! Good wage! I got to learn more to earn more, that's just the way it goes. And although it takes time, it's worth it, don't you know? I'll be a doctor, a lawyer, an actor, or a writer. Work out in the gym and become a prize fighter. Be a pilot, a teacher, drive a truck or train. But whatever I do, I'll be using my brain. See, I've made up my mind to be whatever I can be. That's not for other people, I'm doing it for me. So don't follow the crowd until your chances are blown. Just stay in school and get a mind of your own. Just stay in school and get a mind of your own. Just stay in school.
Thank you. I found my rhythm. I encourage each and every one of you to find your rhythm regardless of the skips. Let's get on tempo and let's rock it. Thank you so much. Let's continue to create.
All right, that was great. Next up, Nina Barbuto. Nina's passion for art, new media, and social learning led her to found Assemble, a community space for arts and technology, in 2011. She is also an adjunct faculty at Carnegie Mellon University for architecture. Welcome, Nina.
How's it going, man? Yeah, nice to see you.
You put your wireless right there. Yeah. You didn't turn it off, did you?
Form together. We build confidence through making by uniting artists, makers, technologists, and learners. Does anyone identify with one of those things that I just said? Maybe. I hear some, maybe there's some things. Awesome. At Assemble, we come together to put together, we assemble, we're a verb. And we have values, right? Which we all have values. We value respect, building agency, collaboration, learning through making, failure as opportunity, and open invitation. And I would like to invite you to practice some of those values with me today. Can you please turn up the lights in the audience? Lights. Okay, awesome. Everyone, please stand up. And I'd like all those to, you're going to come closer. And I'd like everyone whose birthday is from January to June to go to this side of the room. And those who have July to December to this side of the room. Go ahead. Pretty great. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. I'm okay with waiting. Are you standing next to someone new? A new friend? Maybe. Okay. So, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the person you're standing next to, and for the next minute and a half, I'm going to give you a time, I'd like you to try to find 3 things that you have in common. Okay, ready, go. You have 30 seconds left. Okay, please stop. You can take a seat. You can throw the lights back down if you want, and that'll get everyone to sit down. All right, thank you, everyone. Did you learn something new? Did you make a new connection? Yes? Wonderful, awesome. I just increased your value. Everyone's social capital just went up a little bit. Isn't that awesome? You are surrounded by opportunity, and you can start by taking advantage or incorporating that opportunity into your life by smiling, saying hello, and listening, right? And now I'm gonna drop some knowledge. So Ethan Rowland and Gregory Landua have this concept of 8 forms of capital, or value, right? We all have value, we have values. And the Oxford Dictionary defines capital as a wealth in the form of money or other assets. Or a valuable resource of a particular kind. And we're definitely all a particular kind of person here. We're creatives, right? Remember when creative was a bad word to call you're creative? It's hip now. Okay, so there's 8 forms of capital, right? Some have said there's creative capital even. But the 8 forms that they talk about are the intellectual, which is the knowledge assets, spiritual, which really is like self and the universe, and however you define the spaces in between. There is social, which you all have increased just now. There's material, which comes into the non-living raw and or processed materials. There are the financial, cha-ching, we all understand this, right? There is the living, which can be defined as the ounces, acres, or hooves, or the animals, plants, water, and soil. It's the stuff that we're really gonna have the like World War V and III and everything else in between. Think water world. There is the experiential, so what you've done in your life, and there's the cultural. And this is the internal and external process of a community, right? It's what and who we are. We own this. We. So, I welcome you to come to assemble, but today, I want to just bring it out to you that we have to be creative together. We got this together. We are creative. We gotta get it together to solve our big problems. We need to create, connect, learn, and transform together. We gotta make it to make it. We need to assemble. Thank you.
All right, next up is Phil LeBoon. As an entrepreneur, Phil started his first company in his parents' basement in 2001. Now, alongside his handpicked team of industry experts, iFlow provides hundreds of clients with consulting and digital marketing services that help their business stand up and be heard by audiences both on and off the web. As an avid investor into tech startups, Phil is involved in the day-to-day operation for several rapid growing companies. Welcome, Phil.
Buddy, how's it going? When I say hip, you say hop, right? No, it's the other guy. All right, so I was really thinking hard what I wanted to talk about today, and I really kind of just thought I'm gonna do a brain dump and kind of jump all over the place, which for those of you who know me, that's pretty characteristic. So today, the big focus is gonna be on things that I've learned, my oopsies, my WTFs, and my SMHs. If you don't know what it is, just Google it real quick, I won't mind. One of the big things I want to discuss today is about failing more than you succeed. I've had a lot of failure in my life. As an entrepreneur, they talked about iFlow Internet Marketing. That's kind of always been my umbrella. And a lot of people say Phil's this digital ad buyer, but Phil's also runs a wooden lifestyle business. Phil also has real estate properties. Phil also gets involved with tech companies like Community Co. and Young Entrepreneur Council, which Lisa and Dan are both a part of. I find really cool businesses and I try to help the digital marketing end of it succeed, which doesn't always happen. For example, with our newest company, I learned I really don't like advanced manufacturing. Dan, who those of you spoke earlier, Dan was nice enough to teach me the stuff I didn't know in the beginning, how to set up my business, how to do logistics, how to do manufacturing. But at the end of the day, what I've really realized is it's a tough world out there. And we'll jump to the next slide to get into that. So some failed businesses that I've had. I had a breathalyzer keychain company back in 2001. I had a neon sign company, I think 2003. I had a real estate brokerage, which we hit record numbers and record profits, and then the market completely tanked, and I didn't get paid, and I lost a massive amount of money, and I've been in a lawsuit for 12 years on that one. We got backed by Y Combinator for a job app called Visible. Huge potential. We had a $5 million valuation right out of the gate. It was a very big news in Pittsburgh. Fizzled out like that, mostly because of things you can't comprehend. It's just things you couldn't foresee, I should say. I ran a bed and breakfast in Costa Rica completely on a whim. I was down there on vacation, living in it was like an $8 a night hostel. Found an opportunity to buy this massive half-acre, beautiful property. Started a bed and breakfast. Ended up going under. With that being said, I've had some successes in my life as well. iFlow, as everyone knows. I started a new real estate business, which does well. We do rental properties, Community Co., Wooden, and a new company, Growth Stackers. What's very important to know about business in general, in my opinion, is that you can have 5 failures for every success, and you're still gonna be way above the average person. You're going to fail and you keep learning. Like if we look at some of these businesses that I've completely failed on, it actually fueled, you'll see like kind of the resemblance of, we'll say Ideal Real Estate Rentals. I learned because when my real estate brokerage went under and the whole market crashed in Florida, I bought up a whole bunch of rental properties and there was a new thing emerging called VRBO and Airbnb. So these $500,000 houses were now going for $150,000. I learned enough about the market and the industry where I was able to gobble up a whole bunch of these houses and start a successful company out of the failure. One rule that I like to get out to everybody is making money is tough. I think a lot of people that don't have businesses do not realize how hard it is to make money without a pre-built system, without inheriting something. Trying to make your own path and start a new business, which is what I thrive for. I love doing something I've never done before, is really, really tough, but it's also extremely rewarding if you're successful. It takes years of hard work, and it's an emotional roller coaster, and that actually was a picture of me in 2004. I just thought it was a great photo to illustrate the point. If you talk to any entrepreneur, and I've had the benefit of getting to know a ton of entrepreneurs through our different organizations, it is extremely difficult. If you look at our private groups, if you look at our meetups, you will see the amount of emotional trauma that happens to entrepreneurs on a daily level is almost overwhelming, and it's what pushes a lot of people out. When they do hit those failures, they ended up backing out of it because it's hard to come back from. You really have to get jaded and get that iron kind of persona in order to get past those failures and realize things are gonna get better. So this is actually a typo here, but I meant balancing life and business as an art form. And I'm sure they can recognize this. I don't know if they're entrepreneurs or not, but I feel like this sometimes, maybe metaphorically. And I just had my first baby, I think it's 10 days now. It's been a lot of lack of sleep, but I think it's been about 10 days. And it's even harder for me to comprehend how these big, successful serial entrepreneurs are able to juggle as much as they can juggle with a family, because I'm 35, I've never really had to deal with that until recently. But it is a massive amount of restraint not to go, I'm imagining, too far in either direction. I personally like to have work kind of take over my life, but as I'm going through this massive change, I'm realizing what's really important. And it's just a balance that you have to drive through. I'm going to just skip through these because I only have like 5 minutes left, and I'll just talk about some important stuff here. So these are some of probably the most actions that define me as a human being. This was back, I started a company in 2002. It was a breathalyzer keychain company that I started after some friends died. Several friends died in unrelated auto accidents, all involving alcohol. So thought, well, what can I do? I was very young at the time. That's actually my real cell phone number that I still use to this day as the business line in there. And it was an amazing experience where I got to learn a massive amount of just how to run a business and how to start a business. It was out of my parents' basement. These little yellow breathalyzer keychains, my parents were helping me put them together in our living room while watching American Idol or whatever we did back then. But it was an amazing experience that taught me a lot, and mostly that just because you can sell something for a profit doesn't mean it's going to be successful. And that's exactly what happened. Apparently there's regulations with the chemicals and the shipping in these that I had no idea about. I did not have what's called business insurance when I was selling these breathalyzers to prevent drinking and driving accidents. But more importantly, it really was the first time that I got out in the public and people knew who I was at the time. But I failed, and I publicly failed. And it went from, everyone's like, yeah, Phil, you're the breathalyzer keychain guy. And my school was, I went to a tech school, a vocational school, and I was like their big prodigy. And then it just all came crashing down as the company went under. And it was every time you had to bring it up to somebody. This is before social media really took hold. So you had to personally tell every person you failed. It was quite the experience. But one of the best experiences, it shaped me, it helped me, it jaded me for future failures. My first six-figure lawsuit, that's an actual photo of my attorney. I swear, it's on his website. I lost a lot of money, and it seems like the legal system is just, in the US, is a very difficult thing to navigate, and I learned that not everything can be solved with, well, then I'll just sue them, which is something I hear quite a bit, is that you think if something goes wrong or if a partner screws you over, that you can just take them to court, and that's usually not the case. It's usually worth more headache than it's worth. But getting in a massive lawsuit taught me so much about law. I could probably become an attorney at this point. Just learning all these little nuances, what not to say, what not to do. It was a major learning lesson for me, and just being involved with the courts, and this was in another state, so I had to fly back and forth and get involved in some pretty crazy stuff, but it's definitely defined me as a human, and it's something that will forever be ingrained in my head here. So some positive stuff, because I don't want to be like Mr. Negative up here as everyone else was like so positive and awesome. My first 8-figure contract from a marketing perspective. That was just amazing. It was from what used to be what's called a retainer base, like paying me for consulting hours. We ended up turning it into paying me on performance, which I actually started investing my own money, i.e. putting money on credit cards and hoping they pay me at the end of the month to sell product for a pretty big Fortune 500 company. We were able to just hit it out of the gate, do really big numbers, and I was risking my own capital, which the pros and cons on that was I didn't have to tell them what I was doing, I didn't have to get permission. On the other side, I had to risk everything in order to try to make it happen, and I could have lost everything and been in serious debt if it didn't work out. But as we start to scale and as we started to grow, we did over $10 million in affiliate sales with that client. Oh, I didn't know. I got a GIF in there. All right. Another great thing that I think has molded me as a human, has taught me so much, is almost all through my 20s, I was a digital nomad. I just had my laptop. I was traveling all over the world. If I really felt like it, I would just end up living somewhere. And I got to meet amazing people. And I'd say I learned way more living in the poorer countries than living in the more developed Western Europe. But there's photos of just friends that I've met, and I was by myself, basically just traveling, meeting people, and it was just an amazing life experience. And it's really just seeing other perspectives and people in other cultures, how they react to things. Your brain just kind of ticks, and I feel you just become much more enlightened. And that's what I'm already hoping with my daughter. I can show her some of that, take her traveling, and show her that it's not just everyone in this little hyperbole US way of thinking, but you can learn from the perspectives and views from other cultures. And then lastly, probably if you Google me, this is like the big thing. I threw a fundraiser for I was supposed to be married. It never happened. I turned into a fundraiser, made international headlines, interviews in 40 countries. That was a crazy, crazy experience, which I still deal with pretty often just because of the amount of publicity that this ended up getting. But it has definitely showed me just the power of what you can do if you do something positive. I never in a million years would have guessed that this would have been a big, successful kind of event like it was. And it's just taught me so much about life. I'm very, very proud of this. But that's it. That's my 10 minutes. So I thank everybody. Hopefully a little bit of insight. Everyone learned a little bit about me, a little bit about life and my perspective. So thank you very much.
Why is everyone leaving? Something I said?
Really know how to clear the house, Joe. Hang out.
Okay. And of course the mic is backwards for the shirt. Let's see if this will work. Excuse me. Great. And if they have trouble hearing you, pull it out a little more.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Am I in the middle? Good grief. Okay. How are you?
I like the smoke. Makes me feel like I'm on Star Trek.
Reminds me of the dingy bars.
Oh, yes, that's
Okay, let's get started. My name's Jim Denova, and I'm with the Benedum Foundation, and we are a private grant-making organization that had the good fortune to come across this enterprise that Kim Chesney and Audrey Russo started some years ago, where they saw the opportunity for the Pittsburgh region, which has its natural assets in tech transfer from such organizations as Carnegie Mellon University, and also this rich arts and cultural community that we have here. So the whole idea behind the Creative Industries Network is to try to combine those two sectors and look at the entrepreneurial opportunities, the business growth of creatives in this region. And everybody knows it's not new to say that innovation comes out of cross-pollination, of interdisciplinary inspiration and creativity. And this is what came from that kind of cross-pollination. And you saw today some of the examples of creatives who have started business, grown businesses, expanded businesses. But what we have now is a rather spirited panel. They're all well-respected individuals, but this morning when we were talking about what we should say, it became such a runaway conversation that we tossed formality out the window. So what I'm hoping to do, I think we're the last program of the day, is to continue that kind of spirited conversation. And we really want to look at those kind of factors that contribute to an economic revitalization of communities, of industries, of individual creatives. So what I'd like to do is just give you a quick introduction of the individuals we have with us from across the country, and then we'll launch into a few questions, but we are going to have time for audience participation. And I'd really like, at least in the last 10 or 15 minutes of our show, to hear some questions, challenges, or criticisms, whatever seems appropriate at the time. But let me start from the far end of our panel. Bonnie Fahoome, who is the Director of Business Programs for Detroit Creative Corridor Center. And this is a very elaborate incubator and set of wraparound business services for individual artists and creative and technology startups in the Detroit area. And much of what they have done in their incubation program inspired the Creative Industries Network and some of the activities that Kim has put together. So, next to her, Germaine Williams, the CEO of Pittsburgh Center for the Arts and Pittsburgh Filmmakers, which is a community-based nonprofit, but it's organized over the years many different art forms, so it's both the cultivation of artists, arts education, and does a number of venues in the region. And Germaine was also, prior to this new gig, the senior program officer at our local community foundation, the Pittsburgh Foundation, in the area of arts and culture. Next to him, we have Michael Soileau, who's Vice President of Planning Planning, Strategy, and Research for Comcast. And he's been involved in a number of community initiatives and expanding the role of technology into solving community problems and advancing initiatives and new product lines. Thank you, Michael, for flying in for this. Next to Michael, we have Harley Baldwin, who's Vice President of Design for Schell Games, which is a local gaming and animation program spun out of Carnegie Mellon University. Started with 2 people. One of those examples of the assets of Pittsburgh's arts and technology assets. Company now has 90-some employees.
Over 100.
Over 100 employees. Since this morning, they've added 10 new employees. And they are one of those classic examples of visual arts and technology combining. Without either, it wouldn't be an enterprise. Very successful company. And last but certainly not least, Jeanne Nathan, who was the founder and continues to be executive director of New Orleans Contemporary Arts Center. And this is a venture in the greater New Orleans area that really looks both at the economic acceleration of the arts in the community, but also the education of arts and the growing workforce in this particular sector. So what I'd like to do is sort of pose a first question and really ask the panel to comment to one another, as well as add some comments they would have on this theme. But really, I'd like to start with Jeanne and ask you, is how can we better engage government, the nonprofit sector, business sector itself, and how to accelerate the creative economy and help use the creative economy to improve communities? And you've had a lot of experience.
Well, let me start by saying I'm actually the executive director of the Creative Alliance of New Orleans. I was a founder of the Contemporary Arts Center many years ago. 40 years ago, it's our 40th anniversary. So I just wanted to not have anybody out there think I'm claiming to be something I'm not. And so I would, not to embarrass you. But I also want to say that I'm going to give kind of an amorphous little bit of a TED Talk and follow my notes, otherwise I would talk over the whole 45 minutes. You don't want me to do that. But I come from one of the most creative places in the world. New Orleans has had a universal impact on culture. Jazz changed the world in so many ways. And creativity literally is block by block, house by house. If you deal with students in the schools, you're just astounded at the percentage of students in the schools who are creatives in one way or another, whether it's music, architecture, arts, design, all the various fields of the creative industries. But we're faced with some really daunting challenges there, both that come from the local area and the national area. So I was kind of, when I first got my question, I was saying, oh my God, why me? Because we are not a place that has a lot of either public or philanthropic support. We only have one Fortune 500 company, and we just don't have the depth of philanthropic engagement that a lot of other places have it. To the extent that we have people who have the ability to be philanthropic, they tend to channel it through Mardi Gras. So they put it into the cruise and the parties and the royalty that goes along with it. It's an interesting place. Anybody in the audience who hasn't been there, I invite you to come. It's a blast. However, we've been faced with some pretty serious challenges, both on the local level and from the national level, that have moved me to the conclusion that I think the entire paradigm for how we finance the creative industries and the arts has passed its expiration date. It needs to come off the shelves, and we need to put new strategies on the shelves for how we deal with financing the things that we would like to see grow and inspire the next era in our economy and in our arts. So I think that we need to, we've dealt with some challenges that are exceptional to Louisiana. We're on the forefront of coastal erosion and ocean rise. We've dealt with the crash of the oil prices, and we are a fossil fuel dependent state. And BP spill, coastal erosion, a lot of long-term racism and poverty. I mean, we've got our challenges, which in some strange way may contribute to our creativity, because what it ends up meaning is that people have to be very creative in one way or another to survive. And other than that, it's really a kind of mystery and inexplicable why we are as creative as we are. On top of that, we have the Trump watch. So we know that we are faced with the potential of NEA being literally defunded and put out of existence altogether. We keep thinking he's not really going to do that, but for those of you who don't know it, he did pull us out of the Paris Accord today. So it's just, I don't need to say anything more about that. You hear about it every night on all the cable shows, or at least I know we do. But faced with that, we also are living through this profound economic transition. We're in the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution. It's technical, it's many things. It's not just about tech. It is about creativity. And the creative industries are leading the economic opportunities of the future. There are those of us who are convinced of that, but we have to do a better job of convincing other people of that. And I think public sector, the philanthropic sector, and the business sector all have to really get over some of their areas of focus that are not relevant to the future. They need to get past some of these old ideas and kind of give up some of the shibboleths that we've been dealing with, the anachronistic attitudes about tax breaks and reducing government involvement, and kind of move on and deal with the fact that what we really have to do is figure out, okay, what is this new economy that we're dealing with, and how do we prepare our youth for it, and how do we support creativity in the midst of it? So I say we need to kind of hit the reset button and come out with a whole new approach to financing the arts. And I think it has to be based on the same things that we do in our new business world. We have to support the small companies. We have to do workforce development for creatives. We have to look at marketing as an important area to invest in, and not just these small projects that we've been doing grants for, but rather look at it on a more universal level and deal with it in terms of investment more so than funding and granting. And one of the things that we could do in the area of education, for example, we know Teach for America has worked so incredibly well. Well, why don't we do something like Creative America and really try to look at a way of infusing a lot of creative talent and support into our schools the way we are doing it in through Teach for America. So I say out with the project grants, dependence on the political wins, status-oriented funding, name on the wall kind of stuff. Although we're grateful for the funds that we get from those names on the walls, but we need to get past it, I think,
yes,
and think
look around
more
you.
about investment. So along with the neighborhood revitalization, it comes from creative activity. We all know how that works. The artists come, it gets cool, wonderful things start happening, people move in, and the prices go up on everything, and the artists get moved out. So gentrification is a kind of side effect of our revitalization, and that's a problem that we have to figure out how to deal with much more creatively. And at the same time, look at our rural and suburban areas that maybe we've been seeing people moving in from the suburbs into the cities. So now, do we have to fill maybe our malls with art projects as opposed to our warehouses? I mean, I think we have to think very creatively about rural and suburban areas as well. So one last thing, the thing that I'm pretty sure all of us in the creative fields have had a problem with is our messaging. We keep trying to talk about the creative industries and talk about the creative sector, but there's a lot of people who still don't know what that means. So we have to really look at more creative ways of messaging. So that's my little TED talk about how to move forward.
Well, there are a number of key points there. So let me just ask
Just
the
a few.
panelists if you can respond to any of them.
So I would double down on a couple things that was mentioned. One is, you're right, I think that we need to rethink the modeling of funding. However, I would also say that there are models out there that have been proven when you actually help define a common problem between companies that want to bring employees into a city, cities that want to grow the economic development impact of bringing companies and their employees, and the arts and creative groups that exist and or you want to overpopulate. And what I mean by that, there's a definite intersection that exists that we just need to, I think, to work harder at uncovering. And when you do that, you create what we've seen in places everywhere from Brooklyn to, places in New Orleans, actually. You would argue now today that home prices in New Orleans have, almost doubled in
More
some
so.
neighborhoods.
More than
And the interesting thing I would say is that, as an example, if you look at Chattanooga, and you say Chattanooga claims to have grown all these businesses alongside of places like Kansas City, and you compare what's happened to New Orleans, you can see the employment growth rate has far outpassed those two cities in New Orleans. And why? It goes back to the creativity and the can-do atmosphere that exists. Now, alongside of that, there has been some government intervention and positioning and support with certain grants and economic development options that are available. So I think that at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon all of us, people like us sitting on this stage and in the crowd, to really help uncover that common thread that helps all the parts of the community. Because we all know when each part of the community succeeds, you know, all boats rise, right?
The can-do attitude is an interesting part of it as well. We give tours of our space, of our studio, and we get many people stopping by, and inevitably during one of these tours, a teacher or a parent will take me aside and will look across the studio and say, how do I prepare my kids to work here? And the answer that I have to give them is, it's not about how well they memorize algebra formulas. It's about how well they spot a problem and think up a solution to it and try that solution and find out what's wrong with it and try again.
Yeah.
It's that can-do attitude,
Yeah.
right? And one of the problems with the funding stream is that right now, the funding stream is super risk averse. It tries very hard to only fund those things which have a guarantee of success. But nobody learns how to actually make creative things by success. We learn through failure. It's the way that we are, you try to make a fire, and you try to make a fire, and you do that 100 times, and you might learn how to make a fire. And the same exact operant is happening in our brains when we're trying to make something happen creatively.
Yeah.
And so to some extent, I think you're absolutely right. If we've got a funding stream right now which is risk averse, then we have a funding stream which is not actually incubating the people and the processes and the minds which have to learn to be a little bit able to handle the moments of failure that come along with real innovation and with real growth.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly know where that funding stream can come from, but until we've got the ability to keep people, I mean, they don't need to get rich, but they need to be able to stay afloat, to make the mistakes that they're going to make so that they can learn how to lean into some success.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I would say just 2 points. One, about gentrification. The key to fighting gentrification is really about ownership.
Yeah.
Is that artists have a stake in the places in the neighborhoods that they help revitalize. So I think that's...
And given the opportunity to have that stake.
That's right, and that they can benefit when things turn, that they can be a part of the network and the weaving of community. But the other thing I would say, just in terms of funding streams, I actually feel like there has been a turn in the last 10 years. And thinking about the NEA, certainly this kind of shift to creative placemaking and trying to infuse the arts, get artists around the table early in terms of neighborhood revitalization and those different kinds of revitalization efforts. I feel like that was a major shift at the NEA. I think it was done because the budget was being cut and they had to figure out how to access new resources. And so the strategy became, how can we get the arts into community development, into economic development? And I think that's happening. I think there's some really important projects happening and big investments. And then the other thing that I think has happened is the focus on individual grants. I mean, I think it's something that the NEA always got into trouble with, but unfairly so. But a number of foundations have shifted to focusing on individual grants. And I think that's where you have the investment in the individual to give them the creative time, to really work out ideas. It's not necessarily something that's going to end up immediately on the stage. I think a lot of the project grants, the piece has to be finished and you have to be ready to get it to the audience. But individual artist grants help individuals in the studio developing new work. And I think there's been a shift in philanthropy in the last 10 years, around support to individual artists.
So I'll just steer us just a little bit away from the funding stream, not because it's not an important topic, but to talk, because you touched on lots of other things as we were having this conversation about gentrification and individual artists. And the work that we do at DC3 is really, we talk more about design than art, and design seems to be the terminology it can be sort of exclusive in some ways. So we're talking about the can-do attitude, and you described this whole process that I'm thinking, well, that's the way we would describe like the design thinking process.
Yeah.
But if we start talking to people in our neighborhoods and in our neighborhood businesses, people that have owned businesses in our commercial corridors in Detroit neighborhoods for a long time, you start saying, well, you know, you need to go through this design thinking process, and you need to have them, they're like, what? And their eyes glaze over. That's all part of this, kind of this gentrification thing isn't just an actual thing that happens, but it's this process of how we talk to people, how we invite people, what's available to them, and language is a big part of it. And I think we have to be more, all of us, and more conscious of how we're talking about things so that they do feel like this is something for me.
If we use jargon, we lose them.
Right, we talk about economic development and design thinking and development, and their eyes glaze over, like that has nothing to do with me. But the reality of it is, and the festival theme for Detroit Design Festival this year is design is everywhere, and it is for you. It's in everything you do, it's in everything you buy, it's in you know, the way you move through your store, it's in the way you create an experience for your customer. And you know, but if we start talking to them about your user experience and they're like, what? So what we're really trying to do this year,
UX,
right? One of the big projects that we're working on this year, because our big thing we're focused on in Detroit is neighborhood revitalization, because we know that we have to create amenities in the neighborhood and bring residents back to the neighborhood if the city is going to really rebound beyond the downtown and midtown area that's gotten so much attention lately. And in order to do that, we have to bring tools that meet them where they are. So we're creating a commerce design toolkit. We're licensing Montreal's commerce design competition, but it's a competition for people who have paid for professional design services and redesigned the facade or the interior of their commercial space. So again, having come from an environment where I was working really on the ground, grassroots, brick and mortar businesses in our neighborhoods, that's not reality for those folks. They're not going to be able to compete in that competition. So that doesn't do anything to include them or to invite them to the table or the conversation. So instead, we're creating this sort of toolkit and series of hands-on workshops where we're walking them through different things that they can do. What can you do in 5 minutes a day to improve the design of your business? And it's things like, you know, sweep the sidewalk, you know, take all that junk out of the window and create, you know, this visual. So we're trying to find actual solutions where we're bringing it to people in a way that they can relate and not feel like they're shut out of this fancy thing called design, where all the kids who went to private design school get to play and we don't, because we're designers from the street and have this can-do attitude because we've had to figure out how to survive, which is one of the things that makes Detroit such an exciting place.
I love that you brought up design thinking, because it hits on multiple things that's been mentioned a couple times. So one is, you're right, when people talk about design thinking, not everyone knows what that is, right? So let me just share a really short story, but Jefferson University in Philadelphia is the first university to introduce design theory into their teaching for medical students. Fascinating. So we had an opportunity to figure out if there was a community problem in Philadelphia where we could engage multiple partners to solve that problem, where everybody agreed it was a problem. So the problem that was identified by 4 different partners, Jefferson, Penn, the Food Trust, and OIC, which is a back-to-work program, but they also do after school, was the problem with underserved communities, and in those communities, kids who were being left out of the nutrition conversation because they were living in food deserts. They didn't know the differences between, you know, a banana and a bag of chips, because it was just, you know, they've always had the bag of chips. And so we engaged the medical students to come in with their design theory hats on to work with students from an underserved community. And the Food Trust came in and said, here's the value of nutrition. So from an innovation technology perspective, we had them make their own GPS devices so that they could understand that you don't have to spend $300 to get a GPS device and to measure your steps, et cetera. You can actually make it if you were provided the tools. They made these devices, we set them loose in their neighborhood, they identified food sources. The epidemiologist from Penn came in, mapped it out, and said, these are the safest routes to those food sources. Not just from a crossing the street perspective, but avoiding gunshots, right? That's the kind of neighborhood. And so these kids learned that value that we suspect they will take and introduce back into their homes, but to give them more of an opportunity for that success, we had a foundation come in that cooks with kids to teach them how to cook. So what they learned in class from a nutritional standpoint, with the design students helping them to design everything from the GPS device to meals, they actually cooked in the collaboration studio. So it was the opportunity to sort of lessen the risk of investment by engaging multiple partners to come in the same collaboration opportunity, and then identifying that mutual objective that everybody was feeling good about and solving.
What happened after the semester ended?
So we tracked them for 3 semesters, and all of them are still very engaged in the nutritional aspect, but it's still a challenge to encourage that dollar spend on a banana versus a bag of chips, or I mean, it's not easily broken.
I think one of the things that we're dealing with in New Orleans and that I'm very focused on is the need for various, whether it's individual artists or artistic enterprises of whatever discipline, is the need for marketing dollars. And marketing dollars is not something that easily comes again from either the public sector or the philanthropic sector, to go back to that concern. And I've noticed that some of the cities around the country that are actually finding new sources of financing are forming coalitions between the business and the public and the arts sectors to come up with new sources of financing. And one of the areas that money is going into is marketing. We have this huge new kind of Williamsburg community in New Orleans. It's the St. Claude area, so it's sort of downriver from the French Quarter. And you have artists galore who have gravitated to the city since Katrina for a variety of reasons, just learning that we're a living city, not just a place where Dixieland jazz was created, but that is still
I think that's a good enough reason to move there.
Created. But we're worried about the sustaining of this energy, and because great shows are being put on, artists being shown, and the audiences and the customers are not there yet. And so attracting them is about marketing. So I'm very convinced that, again, looking at the whole paradigm of financing the creative disciplines through investment as opposed to grants, as opposed to project grants, I think is critically important.
I'd like to, if I could comment on that, because I think foundations in particular are moving more towards the support of entrepreneurship through incubators, through entrepreneurship services, the things that support the emerging artists. But one thing and correct me, Germaine, we don't have is patient capital. So seeing the long run. So I'd like to hear some comments about not only doing the right thing, but how long do you do the right thing, and how do you weather the failed experiments that lead to the great successes?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I think is really important when you talk about patient capital is that you're still looking for risk amelioration, right? But one of the things that you can do is look for opportunities to work with individuals or small groups who are interested in growing slowly and creating a community around themselves that needs what it is that they produce. Being ready to go all in the moment and just sort of bang something out there is very exciting. But if you don't also have the time to create the community around what you're making that wants that product or service, the only option you have is advertising. If you can move forward a little more slowly, I think that those are the kinds of opportunities that patient capital should be looking for. People who make connections, people who engage with their users and have a back and forth, and small groups that are multidisciplinary, that have different lenses looking at the same problem so that they have an opportunity to really react to what it is that's being brought to them by their users or their community. These are all the hallmarks of something that has the possibility of being very successful in the long run, but that will grow patiently and will not outgrow itself too fast.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think over the last 15 years or so, in terms of kind of thinking about crowdfunding and how that's put artists really, this dependence on the foundation, the funder, I think is actually much less than it's probably ever been. And because of crowdfunding, and many artists are so savvy with social media, they have their own following before they have a formal gallery show. They're showing stuff in their neighborhood. They're depending on friends. Like all of that work is happening. And I think it's, like that part of it, we have to kind of celebrate as well as part of the process. But I do think, especially just in the Pittsburgh region, there's a lot of collaboration between artists. There's a lot of this kind of in-kind support that happens, throughout the process before there's a major grant or a major institutional commitment. So.
I think artists, design companies, it's no different than any other business. At the end of the day, we have to, there has to be a market for what you're doing, right? I think you spoke to it a minute ago. And so the marketing, and like Jeanne was talking about marketing, and they need more marketing. And it's the same thing with the retail community. You could market, the hell out of whatever you're doing. There's a different, retail is different now. And if you're not keeping up with the trend and you're not responding to how that's going, and I think it's the same with the creative businesses. And this idea of the creating the community and creating the experience, again, so helping people understand it's not just about advertising. And somebody was saying this morning, I can't remember who it was, they can't sell broadcast ads anymore because that's not the way people are engaging with their customers, right? It's about creating experiences, it's about engaging your audience. That's why crowdfunding, I think, has been such a hit in this particular time, because part of the benefit of it isn't just the money that you raise, it's about attracting those first adopters to whatever your idea is, and then keeping them and having them on board with you. And I think it's that whole thing about, is there a market for what you're doing? And so as the support organizations, and you mentioned it a little bit ago, Jimmy, how are we supporting these businesses? What are we doing? And throwing money at the problem. In my former job, I was working with a restaurant in our neighborhood. I just need some money. I just need more money, and I need a marketing campaign. I need to fill this restaurant. Well, you dig in with this guy and you realize, this place is such a mess. I mean, he was a great asset to the community, and we really needed him to stay there, and people loved this guy. But the business operations was such a mess. I finally had to say to him, look, I could give you a pile of money, and I could fill every seat in this restaurant for every meal for the next month. And at the end of the month, I promised you're going to be asking me for more money. Because you don't know how to manage it, you're not figuring it out. Those are the business sides of the problem. So organizations like ours, we're trying to connect the creatives to opportunities, but it's really also, I think, our responsibility to make sure that they understand how to run their design and their art like a business, and treat it like any other business would. And the marketing is an investment, not a cost.
But it is the right kind of marketing. Jeanne said earlier, it's time to reset and look at a new way of investing. And I think that artists, in many ways, have already left. They've moved ahead of the curve. And when you talk about marketing, Harley, you mentioned something this morning that I think it calls for restating here. You said you play test every day.
That's right.
So if you're looking at marketing, you don't decide what you're going to sell and then try to blitz the market. You cultivate the product with the public.
What we decide is, what experience do we want our players to have? And then we work with players as we develop the experience to make sure that we're getting there, to make sure that they understand how to use it, to make sure that they're engaging with it the way that they want to. And we take the data that we get from that playtesting very seriously, because that, in the end, we can tell. If we have a good playtest, we can tell we're doing the right thing. And if we have a bad playtest, that's critical data for us to be able to pivot and make sure that we're actually going where we want to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I think even companies like us, we do the same thing, right? We develop product and we beta test them, and we put them in a market, and we see how well they work and what the customer's response. And we spend a lot of time with the customers to understand, what's the value proposition to you? What's the experience like, et cetera? But just if I could double click on something about the funding and corporations, et cetera, I will tell you that one of the most interesting things for me working for a company like Comcast, we have very specific, from a foundation standpoint, giving parameters, right? But companies can either fit in, nonprofits can fit into that giving plan or not. It just depends, right? That's a very specific guidelines. But what we have found is that if from a business standpoint, you can help me understand where technology and our innovation can help you, that's interesting. That's something that we can get our hands around. And that's maybe, while it might not be a $50,000 check, it could be a lot of bandwidth. It could be a lot of innovation that we're sharing. In fact, it could be marketing, right? I mean, with our marketing arm. So, for all the nonprofits out there that are looking to how do you get that next creative idea out of the door, or all those entrepreneurs that we work with constantly thinking about that, help us help you by helping us define what it is you need that we can give you besides just writing a check.
Yeah, because some of the most important things is just access.
Yeah.
After hours access to editing, or to be able to use the studio in off hours.
Right.
Those things can be invaluable in terms of pushing up the quality of the art making. And just kind of access to resources can be huge.
Training kids with technology.
But we
who
also,
will be ready in a few
we were talking a minute ago about the importance of management of how you do your business, whatever the creative discipline again may be. And I think that this is one of the missing factors in our education program. I don't understand for the life of me why we don't teach business management in the high schools of America, business management and marketing for that matter, in order to facilitate people being able to be independent. More and more, that's a part of our world, entrepreneurial independence, in order to take that innovative idea. And I left this out of my remarks before, but the one phrase that I actually have an ironic agreement with Trump on is making America great again. We can be greater and need to be, and the way we're going to do it is through creativity and innovation. And so we better be training our workforce and our kids for how to do that.
Turning the boat of the way that our education system works is very slow, and we are still really stuck by and large in a system that's trying to train people for the Industrial Revolution, not for the creative entrepreneurial revolution, which is the reality of anybody who's under 30 at this point. So that's why we don't, and you're certainly right that we should.
We should call it the creative revolution. I've been trying to, it bothers me that we only talk about tech, because tech is part of it, but its sister, or its I don't know what to twin, is the creativity. So maybe that we need to talk less about tech and more about creative revolution.
It's interesting that we come back to workforce all the time when we start talking about challenges in Detroit, because we have high unemployment rates, but we have jobs we can't fill because we don't have a trained workforce, and we have of the residents in the city of Detroit, this statistic is probably 3 years old now, but 77% of those residents had to leave the city to go to the job they had, of the ones that were employed. And then there's piles of others that are not employed, and yet we have all these unfilled jobs because the skill sets are not matching up. So there's this big struggle on what are we doing wrong? And yes, our public education system in the city of Detroit is a huge challenge, but all these other workforce training programs, and how are we connecting and figuring out. So one of the other big projects that we're working on at DC3 this year is a small scale manufacturing initiative, and we're working with the Urban Manufacturing Alliance to do a big study of where our assets are and how we connect our makers and our artisanal manufacturers to the manufacturing resources that are underutilized currently because their work went away with the auto industry. So how are we connecting those folks so that they can sort of match up and align their assets, right? And we have some that are coming to us and saying, that's not our problem. Like, our problem is we're turning down business because we don't have the right staff. They're not trained on these technical craft skills, like particularly in the textile manufacturing. So we have some, Detroit Denim is a jean maker. Shinola is there working on some projects and with their leather goods, and they're using some third-party cut and sew manufacturers, but they're at capacity. And so how do we build more of those? Well, we don't have enough people trained, and we don't have, apprenticeships in those areas anymore. So it's not a fast, we've identified the problem, and everybody knows what we need to do. It's not a fast solution, and I think we can come full circle back to the conversation about how we engage government and everyone else in this problem. Is we have to really begin changing, there has to be advocacy and change in policy and how we're addressing our education and our workforce programming.
So
we can't
we only
keep-
have a few minutes to go, so I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions or make some suggestions. I've heard the panelists ask about fresh ideas and where we can go. How do we meld all these different sectors together?
So, Jim, I'm going to ask a question about impact investing, both from the foundation's perspective and what that means in terms of a return versus philanthropic investing, and what you all think about that in terms of supporting the economy and entrepreneurs in general.
Anybody want to field that?
I mean, well, I think I would say a couple things. Number one, just the issue of philanthropy and how it's changed over the last 10 years. Both in terms of a number of new foundations coming online, a new philanthropist, this kind of venture philanthropy that's coming online and having impact in places like Detroit and elsewhere in terms of, trying to rebuild a whole school system like in Newark, New Jersey or elsewhere. So I think that this is a time of great change within philanthropy and some of the different approaches that are happening. But I also think that, as much emphasis, and it's funny having worked in a foundation, as much emphasis as we put on foundations and grant dollars and that, as a resource, it's really this kind of organizing, advocacy piece, community organizing, that's the real engine to the investment. Because the last thing that you want is, foundation folks coming in with the idea that they saw across the country and trying to implement it locally without, real dialogue with community and real connection with community. So I think there are great resources, but for me, you have to be attuned to that community organizing piece and be able to seed and support that before getting to some of these larger levels of investment.
I think it's an excellent point. One answer to the social impact investing is that we don't make as much use of our investment portfolio as we could. Smaller foundations are doing it much more agilely than some of the larger foundations because they can. We have a small foundation in Pittsburgh that's been using its investments to buy homes, flipping them, and helping the community. And I said, isn't that risky? And the director said, we're making 20% profit. How are you doing? So shut me up. But the other point, I want to underscore what Germaine said about community engagement, because we have to exercise a little more effort to engage the community early in the process, not at the end of the process. So too often grant making is a result of internal decisions that we then pitch to communities. And I think we have that a little backwards too. As part of what Jeanne said, it's time to reset, get away from patronage, look at social investment. That means starting with community input before the design process is done.
I heard a great example. It didn't happen in Detroit, but I was recently in Somerville, Massachusetts for UMA's annual gathering, and someone from Dorchester Bay was there talking about a project, speaking of impact investing. So there were, and I'm not going to get all of the details right, but you can look this up. They had a transit project from downtown out to some of the suburbs of Boston and through multiple municipalities along the way, including some severely underserved, impoverished communities. The train lines had shut down many of the transit stops, particularly in those underserved communities over the years. And so what they were realizing is, as part of the overall economic development strategy, this is a huge impediment. It's creating problems for the companies in Boston who can't get people to work because they don't have cars or whatever, and they're not coming in on the transit. And it created just economic devastation for those communities because they couldn't get anywhere and they couldn't use the transit. So a bunch of different investors came together, and I'm not gonna remember the name of the foundation right now, but they were sort of leading the way and bringing other people on board, and the solution was, let's open those transit stops up again. And they put significant amount of money into reopening those transit stops in some of those underserved communities, and now the people in those communities have access to jobs that they couldn't otherwise get to, and the workforce has just, increased for the companies that are at the other end of those train lines. And I just thought it was a great, great story and an example of taking it out of the box a little bit and seeing, basing it on assets that already exist. And how do we utilize the assets we already have and tell a different story?
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really powerful example of impact investing.
If I could just give just a quick example of how we think about impact investment, and it's not at all what you're suggesting. We think about it as an example in bridging the digital divide, right? If we can invest, which we have through our Internet Essentials program, in bringing millions of families into the digital economy, imagine the ripple effect that has. We think that's a significant impact opportunity for us. And so we spend a lot of time on engaging community partners across our footprint, saying, help us reach those folks, those families who don't have access and potentially don't understand the value proposition, right? So how can we educate them on that value as well?
I'm getting the hook here, so we'll take one more question and then close it out. Anybody? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to address that if I could. We have a community below New Orleans called St. Bernard Parish. We have parishes as opposed to counties. And it basically goes downriver and meets the Gulf. It's very threatened. And a lot of people left after Katrina. They lost their homes, and it's a more dangerous place to live. But the leadership in that community, it's agrarian, petrochemical, have decided that the creative industries is a direction they should go in order to re-attract people into this semi-rural suburban area, and have made a commitment to it and are putting investment into neighborhood revitalization projects, into various kinds of cultural districts, into joint spaces for the arts. I mean, it's remarkable. I would say, really, in some ways, that community is making a greater commitment to attracting and growing the creative industries than Orleans, which is at the heart of things.
Can I just add one quick thing? Sure. So I grew up in deeply rural America, and one thing that I can tell you absolutely for sure is that there are already existing community coalitions out there that we could hook up with. 4-H, for example, every kid in rural America is either FFA or 4-H, because that's where you get together with kids your own age and whatever, raise goats or chickens or alfalfa or whatever. And there are 4-H programs that are pivoting to try to bring their point of view and their conversation to these partnerships. If you're looking for ways to engage, those communities really already do exist. But again, we have to start with finding them and talking with them.
Yeah. I would say also in Michigan, a group of librarians from both private and institutional and public libraries had kind of banded together in this particular rural region and said, what can we do after the economic downturn? What can we do to start helping people? And they were always getting lots of help for, I need to use your internet to get a job. And then people would come in and say, I can't get a job, I got to start a business. And this group of librarians created a program called Library Biz Connect, which is really just a model, and they were encouraging librarians across the state to become part of this network where they were beginning to share resources about what it takes to start a small business and how they could become like the sort of small business epicenters in these rural communities. And they've had some great success. In fact, one of the libraries that was participating ended up taking a big wing that was unused and letting one of the small businesses that they had been coaching open a coffee shop in it, which was brilliant, and it brought everybody to the coffee shop and started bringing people back into the library that weren't using it before. And it's helping the libraries to be more relevant because people aren't necessarily going there just to check out books anymore. So it was a really great example.
So, on that note, shall we thank our panel? Appreciate it. Thank you all. And thank you for staying.
Hello everyone. We have a final performance coming up you're not going to want to miss. You might want to stick around for that. I definitely would. We have a final performance coming up, so please, if you're sticky. Great. Audrey's going to wrangle them in. Good evening, everybody. I'm JC Carter from Wrecking Crew Media, and I have the pleasure of introducing our final performance today. Nairobi is a 19-year-old singer, actress, writer, designer, poet, and artist from Pittsburgh. She has performed with Centers for the Musically Talented at Capitol High School, the River City Music Band, Obama Drama Theater as Eveline in The Wiz, and many other roles, and with the Afro-American Music Institute. She is the 2016 recipient of the Regional August Wilson Monologue Competition, as well as the youngest recipient of the Most Valuable Persons in Pittsburgh Award. Please welcome Nairobi.
Divinity is me. I remember when I was a kid, simply following orders because I thought that was the only way to live. A woman seen me with my head down, and she asked me. The woman asked me, have I ever seen divinity? And if I have, could I define it clearly? I shook my head no and continued walking home. When she began to describe this feeling, A feeling at the time I had never known, a feeling which was soaked in luster, power, and exclamation, a feeling which did not yield to any and knew not damnation and had no association, a feeling of love within thyself. Such a strong and powerful love, it drove out the hatred brought by anyone else. I stared at her in such an awe, giving her my full attention as I, awaiting the next thing she would mention. She said, "That is divinity, and better yet, divinity is me. Though it may seem hard to obtain, it lives within my very veins, that it is not limited to any part of me because divinity is me. It fits in my lungs, and with each breath I manage to intake, I am breathing the very air of life, and it powers my entire will, filling me with such might while being completely removed from any pollution. There is no other solution because divinity is me. Divinity is my hair, the way my body flares. It is the color of my skin, yet it is not limited to what is within. It is my spirit, my soul, my heart, my mind, and I need not to search much longer because what I would find in this world could never appease me because divinity is me. Now do you see? In 10 years, a woman will appear and she will ask you, have you ever seen divinity? And if so, could you define it clearly? And when you see her, you'll know, for she is the very conscience embedded in your soul. Let my words be a reminder to you, and no, you need not to find her because at any moment in which you forget, repeat these words in your head. Despite what I may have seen and what anyone may try to tell me, I know divinity is me. For I am divinely black, divinely intelligent, divinely woman, and don't you ever forget that I am divinely whole, divinely soulful, divinely creative and innovative and able. Therefore, a seat at the table is mine and is destined to me. My voice, my body, my spirit, my mind, my heart shall enlighten those who have wallowed in the darkness for much too long. I am the light, therefore I cannot be swallowed by the dark because I am the light. Because this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of yours, you're gonna let it shine. Everywhere we go, you're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine. Let us set it off. Look forward and not behind. Sisters and brothers, let your light shine so it may serve as a guide and lead another generation, a nation of young people which we will be amongst. And we will take what belongs to us. We will make our own paths, and no longer will we be a people to succumb to the wrath of this society. With every last breath within me, I declare divinity. My brothers and my sisters, for the generation to come, for our past, for our present, and for our future, let us rise up above the demise and sit at the table which is divine. Thank you. This next piece is called Where Has All the Love Gone? Where has all the love gone? Do you know? The news channels are beginning to sound like reruns to a poorly scripted melodramatic show with no finale. Despite several rallies and protests, there seems like there is not any progress. Every day we walk by the homeless and tote our briefcases around. We watch 13 Reasons Why and still struggle to identify why the suicide rates are so high. We don't question why Black bodies are left bleeding on the ground, but instead we say they deserved it. Because they serve no other purpose. We ignore mental health, bottle our emotions, and place them onto the shelf, which only heightens the dissociated self as we comment on the beauty of another's selfie. We demean those who do not stand for the pledge instead of asking why this country does not stand for them. We support misogyny, Islamophobia, supremacy, and wonder why hatred seems to run so deeply. This isn't merely about the sweeping of the problems of our nation under the rug, but the issue is we seem to have forgotten how to love. Intimate interactions are more and more of a rarity, which we treat as a luxury when it should be treated as a necessity. And I can guarantee while on my walk here, I have received several disgusted sneers from elders and even peers as if I were the bottom of the barrel, as if I were a pure criminal. And it makes me wonder, why are you afraid to love me? Am I not deserving enough? Because though you abuse me, spit on me, and leave me for dead, I choose to love you instead. Uplift and encourage because I want you to flourish. This year, which was filled with so much tears and anger, I've decided to rise above those who tried to bury me. I mean, really, what's a girl got to do to get some love around here? We cannot shake what must come in the morning because what's done in the dark must come to the light. And here in this country, we fight to keep our secrets hidden. We fight, and the same storyline plays out on each channel, despite how many times you try to change it, rearrange it, or even close your eyes. We are left with the cries of a shattered heart, a broken, wounded soul of a person whose life never mattered. And the damage is collateral, which means this is not a one-person matter. This is something we all must be willing to discover, because loving one another will overcome the hatred of another. Where has all the love gone? Do you know? Thank you.